We're back. New York City Baseball. Past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko. My co-host is Wayne Unger. Wayne Unger, a New Yorker. I'm from California. How are you, Wayne?
I'm good, Ralph. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good, but you're traveling, too. You're doing really well traveling to Florida. Tell me a little bit about what's going on.
Well, I went to Orlando with my youngest son to visit my oldest son, and actually last night we took a ride up to Tampa, St. Petersburg actually, and we scored some excellent tickets. We were behind the Rays dugout, 10 rows up, had unbelievable seats, and
Beautiful.
we got to see a good ball game. That was, I think it was 1-1 going into the seventh, and probably one of my favorite Rays players, even though I'm a Yankee fan, one of my favorite Rays players, Kevin Kiermaier, hit a 2-run homer, which pretty much decided the game. And
very cool.
So, and now I'm down in South Florida visiting my brother and his wife, and and hopefully some friends.
Good. And I hope it's a safe trip for you. And we have a guest, and I'd like you to introduce him because he's a buddy of yours.
Okay. Tonight we have Michael Leuck, but in our circle we call him Lucky. And I'm going to make this as short as I can. When we restarted our Diamond Mine League around 4 or 5 years ago, obviously, everybody was like starting from scratch. We were drafting full rosters, so we did like a computerized dice roll to see who was going to get, in what order you were going to pick. And Michael got the first pick, and because his name is spelled, I believe it's Leuck, right away, another guy in the league said his name is Lucky. And so now he's Lucky.
Well, last week you were Wingo. And,
yes, that was an old nickname of mine.
Oh, nickname of mine. When they called you Wingo, I didn't ask you last week, did they call you Hawthorne Wingo? Did that ever come up? The name
No,
Hawthorne?
it had nothing to do with the Knicks player.
You know who he was, right?
Of course. No, it was it was because I used to go to Chinatown. Well, I still go semi-regularly, but I used to go to Chinatown a lot. And at the time I was working with a friend of mine, and we were working downtown. We used to go a lot. And they had a hard time at this place, Wohops. They had a hard time pronouncing my name. And they used to say Wing. And they always would say, oh, Wing, so you bring your friends again. Wing, you bring your friends. So Carlos started calling me Wingo, and that's how it stuck. So, Anyway, let's get on to baseball. So, and the connection with Lucky, who grew up in Cleveland, and New York baseball is, Lucky always used to tell me how much he hated the Yankees. And, well, Lucky, tell us why you hated the Yankees.
Well, first and foremost, if you're born in Ohio, it's genetically required that you hate two things from birth: University of Michigan football and the New York Yankees, and you're just born that way. And then as you advance into your life, you come to realize why you have this genetic trait to hate the Yankees, and that's because the Yankees constantly beat the Cleveland Indians continually throughout my childhood and into young adulthood, and it just came such a way of being that you just hate the Yankees. That's all there is to it. You don't hate the players so much, you just hate the Yankee concept, and that's how it was.
Right.
But you don't admit to anyone that you even have interest in any Yankee players, any part of the uniform, any part of the history, or any of that. You just hate the Yankees.
Okay. I've come to terms with that. I hate the team and their success, but I worship the players and their success. Sounds great. Looking back, I grew up, as you guys did, in the 50s. How old are you, Lucky?
I'm currently 67 years old.
All right. Well,
he was born 2 years after you, Ralph.
Right,
okay,
1948.
You do have a real memory of Cleveland in 1954. It's probably a small memory. For
right,
you.
I do have a small memory.
But Cleveland in 1954 won 114 games, and they beat a Yankee team that won more games than they ever won in one single year. I think they won 103 games. They had just come off of a 5-game streak where they won from 49 to 53. They won
5-year
world championships.
Streak. Right.
Right.
Unbelievable. The greatest dynasty. DiMaggio going out, Mantle coming in through it, Casey taking over. It was just an incredible time for the Yankees. Well, in 54, they won more games than they had in all those other years in one year. And Cleveland just 114 games. And the New York Giants, just as you well know from reading about it, was the miracle year where Dusty Rhodes went nuts in the World Series, and Willie made that great catch off Vic Wertz, and
right.
It was something else. But I'm 69. I was 13 in 59 when I really was coming into my fandom as a kid, and the Indians had this thing going with the White Sox and the Yankees in a terrific pennant race, and that was a great year. You want to reminisce about that a little bit?
Well, it's interesting you bring up 1959 because I'm such a baseball traditionalist that really that was baseball for me. The 50s and the early 60s to the late 60s. So when you talk the 59s, I see the old style wool uniforms and I see dirt and I see real grass and I don't see any dome stadiums or designated hitters or pitch counts or any of this kind of stuff. So I see real baseball then. And you're right about the White Sox. In 59, they were the go-go White Sox, and they just played the game quick and hard. And the Indians were very good that year, but they just couldn't quite overcome the White Sox. I guess intensity would be a good word. And in the Indians in 59, Rocky Colavito hit 42 home runs, and Cal McLeish had 19 wins, and it was a great team, but they just came up a little short. But it was a great season. It was a season of hope because of what you mentioned, that the Indians had actually beaten the Yankees and stepped ahead of them into second place, and that was big for us. In 59,
that itself, right. It was all how you did against the Yankees. That's like your year is wrapped up in that. No matter how well or poorly you're doing, your year is wrapped up in that. But I just got to tell you that outfield in 1959 was as interesting an outfield to me as I've ever seen. Don't knock the rock. Unbelievable power and a terrific arm. Right field.
Yeah.
Jimmy Pearsall in center field, tremendous fielder who is a colorful guy coming back from some mental problems and had a book written about him and a movie written about him. And he was a terrific fielder. And Minnie Minoso in left, a Cuban-born, terrific, should be a Hall of Famer. You could make a case for, who passed away in the past few years. Just great outfield. You had Woody Held, the former Yankee, playing short, and Billy Martin, playing second base. And Vic Power, who was a former Yankee farmhand who they never brought up because he had the audacity to have been born a black person.
Correct.
I mean, it was just unbelievable of him to have done that. So they could, although he was a terrific fielder and languished in the minors because the Yankees were the Yankees in those days, and Vic Power had a white wife or a white girlfriend, and That's why you hated the Yankees. So,
Yep.
stuff like that. Those are the reasons.
Yep. That's correct.
And,
Vic Power was interesting to me because of his batting stance. If you remember, he's a left-handed batter, and his warm-up swing was kind of an underhand swing up and back and up and back. And when he was at the plate getting ready, he did that. So as a kid, it was so unique. Everybody tried to imitate that swing, but he was really special.
Yeah, I remember him as a fielder, and he was probably the best fielding first baseman of the era.
He was.
He could play second base. He did that for a while with Kansas City. He was a very versatile guy, and just a good spirit. What can you say about Vic Power? So the team was interesting, but another guy very interesting because of his name, Tito Francona,
correct,
off the bench, played all over the place, and he was the father of Francona, who managed
Terry Francona.
Terry Francona, you're right. Managed the Red Sox and still manages. So
manages
he manages the Indians right now.
Absolutely.
Right.
Oh, that's yes. Terry Francona was a guy who knocked Stan Musial off first base or put him in the outfield for a while when they were going back and forth with the Cardinals.
You mean Tito?
Yeah,
Tito.
Tito, right. Yes. God, baseball's a great game. I hear the love and passion in your voice, in both your voices, of course. You want to talk a little pitching from that team?
Well, before we get to that, we can't talk about pitching, but there's one other reason why you don't like the Yankees, and it has to do with Gil McDougald and Herb Score. Do you remember that incident?
You know, I'll tell you, you talk about, I do remember it, but I have some stories about that. You tell it from your memory as a Cleveland fan, and to preface it, Herb Score was this up-and-coming, I think he had already won 20 games, hard-throwing lefty, akin to Koufax in a lot of ways. That all I can say. He wasn't going to ever be as great as Sandy Koufax turned out to be, but he was damn good. And
he was
already a star. And there's Gil McDougald, who, although Gil McDougald hit a home run in the 51 World Series to break the New York Giants' backs, he became one of my favorite players of all time for a number of reasons. And I was a Cleveland apologist, and he, as you will tell the story. He's up there and hits a ball back. And how was it from
hits a line? Yeah, he hit that ball right back and hit Herb in the eye, in the cheek, and it was incredibly scary for everybody. It's one of those things like today you would wonder if he was going to have a brain injury or be killed, really. But it turned out that his injury was very bad to his eye, but what it was really bad to was his persona. He just never recovered from that. And the once dominant left-handed Herb Score fell down and down and down after that and never pitched well. But I had a catharsis with that just a few months ago when I live in Sumter, South Carolina right now, and Bobby Richardson lives here. And I met Bobby Richardson one morning and talked baseball with him, and he told me he was in the dugout that night when Gil McDougald hit Herb Score in the face, and Gil McDougald was as equally disturbed by it as everyone else.
He ended up retiring.
Yeah.
It broke his spirit. He could not play anymore.
That's right. It crushed him. It hurt Herb. But when you're a young kid, you go, the Yankees hurt the Indians. But really, you don't really believe obviously, he can't do it on purpose. But it was great to listen to Bobby Richardson tell the human side of that story and how it affected the Yankees in their dugout equally as bad as it did the Indians in their dugout.
Yeah, and that's nice to know that you're dealing, these guys are human beings with human feelings and what have you. And for that reason, he became one of my favorites. Another reason, was, oddly enough, Gil McDougald, later in life, became pretty much deaf, completely deaf. And,
That's right.
And he was deaf for like 15, 20 years. He couldn't hear anything. And he had grandkids. He never heard their voices. And medical science developed something, an aid of some sort that enabled him to hear sound again, where he had nerve damage or whatever. He wasn't going to be hearing again. Medical science caught up with him before he died early on. Not early on, but he died a young man. And he got to hear his grandkids' voice. That was cool. But one more thing, and then I'm going to let you guys get on with it. One more story. I was talking to Peter Golenbach about utility infielders. And I was so impressed with the fact that both Gilliam in New York and with the Dodgers and McDougald were just these great utility infielders, could play all over. The Yankees won with him as a regular at third, with him as a regular at short, with him as a regular at second, literally won world champions with this guy. He's very versatile. Mm-hmm. And I said, I think these two guys are the best ever utility infielders. Golenbach says, no, there's somebody much, much better. Who? Jackie Robinson. Talk about flexibility. Came up as a first baseman, went to second, played third, played left, on a very, lot of time at these positions, depending on where he was needed throughout his career. So Golenbach trumped me on that one. Gil McDougald was still great. Get on with it, gentlemen. You talk.
Well, let's fast forward to 1997.
Oh,
powerful Yankees team. They lost. They lose to Cleveland in the playoffs. There you gotta have a lot of memory. There, it wasn't back in your youth. You gotta have a lot of memory. Tell us about that for you.
Exactly. Well, actually, that memory starts in 1995. Because in 95, when the Indians went to the World Series, it was like the most incredible feeling I'd ever had related to Cleveland baseball in my memory. Because I was born in 48 when they won the World Series. In 54, I was 6 years old. 59, they came close, and that was it until 95, really. And then 95 and 97, they're back in the World Series. But what made 97 better was what you said. They had to leapfrog the Yankees, and Sandy Alomar's home run did that. And it just made that whole process feel so good to be able to step over the Yankees and go to the World Series. It was just incredible. And the whole place went wild. The whole town was wild about that.
Hey, Lucky, did you ever have any Yankee players that you really liked to mess up your head a little bit?
Let me think. Yeah, I did. I mean, how can you not like Mickey Mantle as a baseball player? But that's too obvious. That's too easy.
Right.
The guy that I really liked were guys like Hector Lopez and Bill Skowron and Elston Howard. Those guys were down and dirty baseball players where they got in the dirt and played the game. And Hector Lopez, talk about a utility guy. He played all over the place. But
absolutely.
Interestingly enough, most of the Yankee guys I liked, the Yankees stole them from Kansas City in so many words. You remember Kansas City seemed to be a farm system for the New York Yankees back in those days. And
guys
Hector
who
Lopez
go back
was one
and
of those
forth.
guys.
Bob Cerv, Ditmar, all
right.
those guys.
Yep.
Absolutely. And they were literally had a deal with this guy named Arnold, who was kind of going bankrupt, and used the Yankees, and the Yankees, he allowed the Yankees to use him as a farm club, literally.
That's right. He did.
He got Maris for him. Just a bunch of guys back and forth when he needed them, farm them out. Sold Billy Martin to Kansas City when after Billy Martin had that big to do at the Copacabana, and George Weiss got mad at him, and he was a big part of the heart of the Yankee team. But I just want to mention, when you see Bobby Richardson and you talk about the Gil McDougald thing, ask him, when Gil McDougald retired, who got the job as the Yankees second baseman? It was Bobby Richardson. So it's funny how things work out. Are you guys still there?
Yeah, we're still here. I tell you, you know what? I'll tell you what Cleveland team sticks out for me, because we'll go back like 80, 84, 80, 85, 86. They had a really, really good hitting team. They had no pitching. But they had Andre Thornton. They had Roberto. Did they have Roberto Alomar back then? Well, that was
what year?
And when they had Bell,
they had
no,
Joe
that's
Carter.
a little later in the 90s when they had George Bell.
No, they had Joe Carter. No, that was Toronto. No, Joe Carter was originally an Indian. They had Julio Franco at short. They had Jacoby at third. The guy? Oh, forget about it. I thought he was. He talk about second coming. Of greatness. They had Corey Snyder. I mean, he power and a cannon, and he was a guy that started at short, and he wasn't a very good shortstop, but he had a cannon out there in right field. There were some others. The names are escaping me right now, but offensively, they had one hell of a team back then. But they had no pitching. They just had absolutely no pitching whatsoever.
That was the Indians' way. They would have hitting and no pitching, or they'd have pitching and no hitting. That's the way it went year after year after year.
Well, what got you out of Cleveland? How did you get to New York?
Well, actually, I never made it to New York. I wouldn't go to New York. I hate the Yankees. I wouldn't go to New York.
Okay. So you have this league long now I got you. You wouldn't go to New York no matter what. It's that bad, right?
I haven't yet, but since I met Wayne, I've come to this conclusion that eventually I'm going to have to go to New York, but I'll get all my shots and inoculations before I go.
Ralph,
shots and inoculations. Wayne told me that you were the guy that set the lake on fire for the first time. Sure.
That was the river, the Cuyahoga River, but it wasn't me. I was out of there at that time. It happened while I was gone, but that's a great story. Oh my goodness! And the old ballpark. Yeah. Oh my!
Is right by the ballpark. And another thing that sticks with me about Cleveland, they had Bill Veeck, and anything with Bill Veeck, and I remember the big record thing with what was it?
Disco Demolition.
That's what it
was.
was.
That was Beer Night. And Beer Night. Disco Demolition was in Chicago, but 10-cent Beer Night's what blew up in Cleveland.
Okay. What happened that night?
Well, they were playing the Texas Rangers, I believe, and they were selling beer at 10 cents each, and people went crazy. They got so drunk that they came out on the field, and they had a big issue, and the Indians had to forfeit the game, and it turned into a riot, basically.
Wow. So that was the last 10-cent beer night, I'm guessing.
That was the last 10-cent beer night. Yeah.
All right. Well, see, I have some sense of what would happen if something like that happened.
Oh, my.
Wayne, you want to take it?
Sure. Now, tell me something. Let's talk about baseball today.
Okay.
What are you seeing with your Cleveland team today?
Well, Indians fans always have hope, regardless of how bad it was yesterday or today or tomorrow. We always have the hope, but what we see is not much change, honestly, because of I don't know. I could take the standard line and say because they're a small market team, but that's irrelevant. I think it has to do with player selection, player development, player scouting, things like that. They have good players, but sometimes they just don't develop at the major league level. Or like, for instance, this year they talk up their pitching staff. It's, really a great pitching staff. And then Carlos Carrasco goes down with that hamstring injury for 2 months, and then Cody Anderson got sent back to AAA today because he's had terrible 4 starts. And I watch him day after day after day, year after year after year, and I'm not sure there's something missing in the intensity of that team. I mean, they fight hard, they come back, but in the long haul, they always come up short. Every time they come up short. Whether they have players or not, they come up short. Remember back in 2008, they have Boston down 3-0, going to the World Series to play Colorado. Colorado was an average team. The Indians would have won that World Series, but Tito or Terry Francona and the Boston Red Sox come back and beat them 4 straight, and out the door they go. There's just something missing, and I don't know what it is.
Well, you know what? I gotta
think if
say,
you were a
this
Cubs
year,
fan.
This year, though, you know what?
Yeah.
I mean, here's the bright side. Well, first of all, myself, I didn't think Cody Anderson was the real deal. I didn't. Okay. Putting your, betting on him, I felt probably wasn't the best move, but Carlos Carrasco going down, it's not bad when you could pull a guy like Trevor Bauer out of the bullpen to fill that hole. It's not the worst thing in the world. And don't forget Brantley just got back.
Right.
They're not a terrible team. They've got one of the new stars of the game at short, and with Lindor. Yan Gomes is hitting the ball really well. Anytime you've got an offensive-minded catcher, that's at a defensive position, you've got the extra offense, and you've also got that at shortstop with Lindor. That's always a plus. You got, you need Carlos Santana to come back. You still haven't plugged the hole at third base, but there's some, I don't think it's that they're so bad. I think it's that, they're in a division right now with Kansas City. Detroit, I expect it to come back. I don't think they're playing as well as they can, but they're still not too bad. And I did not expect. I know a lot of people, like the moves that the White Sox made. They were good moves, but I didn't think that the White Sox, and it's a long season, but I think that the moves the White Sox made were going to put them, in either first or even second in the division. But it's still very early. It is.
It is. And the White Sox are overachieving right now for sure, even though they kicked Toronto in the rear end again tonight. But they're overachieving. But back to the Indians, they need to fill the hole at third base for sure. Because Giovanni Urshela maybe will get that accomplished in the next year or two. I'm not sure. But around the infield with Lindor, he kind of anchors that, and that's definitely a good thing. They're still a little weak at first base. They have Mike Napoli there right now. Not that he's a bad defender, but he's 35 years old, and he's hitting about 230 right now. And you can't, you just can't make a World Series run with Napoli. And Juan Uribe at third base, and Marlon Byrd is an outfielder, and Rajai Davis. Those are the 4 guys they signed in the off season who are skilled baseball players. They're good baseball players.
But they're all ball players with good history of winning. They all have 3-base one. Gomes, you mentioned Gomes briefly. He wins everywhere he goes. He's a hustler and great in the clubhouse. He was out here with
You're thinking of Johnny Gomes. You're thinking of Johnny.
That's not Johnny Gomes.
We're talking
it's
about
John Gomes,
the catcher from Brazil.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm the Tikaczynski from Poland. So what do I know?
But you know what? Well, what it is, those ball players, and to be fair, listen, you know, they're probably better suited. They're better suited as strong role players on a team. But
right.
you know, but Lucky is right. You know, like, you know, you can't put your money on all four of those guys as main guys. So it's like, well, those are four of my starting players.
Right,
know,
they'd make a good bench. I'll tell you that.
You know,
yeah, exactly.
So it's, you know,
but they don't hurt
really
you.
Lucky.
And you know, sometimes it takes a balanced team with no real one guy. If one guy comes together, anybody coming up in the minors that, you know, you could say, well, if we're hanging in June, you know, that kind of thing.
I don't think they've got anybody who they can count on that might come up mid-season. They've got a couple of solid outfielders, might be ready for next year, but I honestly, you know, nothing jumps off of my head right now as far as anyone coming up to rescue them in June.
No, not this year. Definitely not. But those four guys.
But speaking of guys coming up, Lucky went to a minor league game the other night. He was telling me on the phone today. Give Ralph a little Met shortstop hope.
Yeah, that's my therapy. I went to Columbia has a new Class A team that moved here from Savannah, and they're a Class A affiliate of the New York Mets. And so I went to the game last night. Because, wow, New York team, and I'm going there. Sandy Alderson was there, and Sandy Alderson's there again tonight. They were passing out World Series rings to the coaching staff of that team. But I don't remember this.
So cool. That had to be so cool. I wish I were there. Of course, I'm glad I'm there.
I don't remember that shortstop's name, but
Ahmad Rosario.
Players he was impressive. He played the game very well. And then they have a first baseman named Willingham. He has a strange first name. What is it, Wayne? I can't remember his first name. Was it Dash Willingham. Yeah, they're counting on him for something later on down the line with the Mets. But it was
what was
usually
his shortstop's name? Wayne mentioned it, and I didn't hear it.
Ahmad Rosario. I mean, he's
okay.
He might be there. He's like
their third prospect.
I think
third number one prospect. Third best prospect.
But he is their shortstop of the future.
I think so.
Nice. Well, let me tell you something about the shortstop and the second baseman of the present with the New York Mets. They are very, very solid. This is one. They were hanging on to a lead when the show came on tonight, so I don't know how they finished, but they're playing some very, very good ball with a solid team with some depth and excellent pitching, but solid all the way around. So I feel very hopeful. That's my report. But especially
and the Mets. Wait, the Mets present day shortstop. Who did he come up with?
Yeah.
Did he come up?
Tell
with
him, Lucky.
He came up with. Oh my God! I got on my mind.
Drupal Cabrera. Who did he come up with?
He came up with the Indians. Well, actually, he played a long time with Cleveland. Definitely, that's right.
Yeah,
I believe they signed him out of Cuba.
Oh, okay.
Drupal. I remember for a long time, the Indians were taking shortstops from Seattle and using them. And I think they got Asdrubal career from Seattle early on in his career. I think I'm just going to look that up. Yeah.
Well, I can't say much about range. I haven't seen him enough to see how far in the hole he goes. But he has a very, very accurate arm, and he's very solid. I mean, he's made like one error the whole year, and he works very well with Walker, who's off to this crazy start. And we joked about that on opening day or the second day of the season, what it takes to win people's hearts in New York. And I think he won the second game of the year with a game-tying blah, 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 or game-winning hit. And it's mushroomed. He's got like 8-9 home runs, and it's April, and he broke Jeff Kent's record. And they're winning, and they seem to be doing it quite without instance. In other words,
right.
The bullpen has been pretty solid. It isn't something where they're fretting every night to come back like they were last year. They had 86 miracle wins last year, it seems. This year things are nice, and as we all know, it depends on injuries and staying healthy a lot. So
exactly.
Already Arnaud is on the DL with a bad shoulder. Pilecki, I can't pronounce his name because I am what I am. And he's coming in, and he's a good catcher that was providing depth. So we'll see what happens. What's your Yankee report for the week, Wayne?
My Yankee report for the week is
not a report. Just we're wrapping.
Oh, my report for the Yankees. Oh no.
Okay. You can repeat that 4 or 5 times. We have a segment. If you just let. Oh no.
Oh no.
Wayne would appreciate that. I don't know if you caught this on Facebook. Fritz Peterson, a good friend of the show, a former Yankee 20-game winner and a Cleveland Indian, might add, post Yankee nostalgia, American League nostalgia, his career, almost every day. So he posts this picture of an old-timers game in New York. If anybody grew up in New York, old-timers days were great because of their tradition. They had a million guys who would come back who were great players from the past, right? So he posts this beautiful picture of Hank Bauer, maybe Gil McDougald, the Mick. They're all sitting there, and some guy writes over, it's funny how the Yankees have an old-timers day every day. The Yankees... I thought of you, Wade.
But
let me tell you, I'll give you some hope. When you have old players on your team, let them warm up a little. When the weather starts warming up, they do much, much better. So I would just stick with things as they are, ride the Yankees, and know when the warm weather comes, older players respond.
Yeah, you know what? It's early, and you know what? Monday night they won. I mean, Monday night Eovaldi pitched a great game. He had a no-hitter going into the 7th. So, but last night was a killer because Severino got rocked, and Lucky knows I invested pretty high in Severino in our draft. So I was. I'm counting on him to break out this year, but that's okay. I'm hedging my bets with another breakout candidate named Corey Seager.
People might be coming in to hear what talk about. You guys talk about the league you have, and it's a different aspect of fantasy baseball than I'm used to, but it's very interesting. It's called Diamond Mine Baseball. Am I correct?
Okay. The game itself is called Diamond Mine Baseball. And the game itself, it's an old game. I mean, don't expect a game with it's nothing like MLB The Show that you play on a PlayStation. There's no bells and whistles. There's no graphics. It's all stats. It's
right.
Stat replay. I mean, you have lefty-righty splits. Pitches have, there's the ground ball ratios. There's all the pertinent stats as well as They're also rated for how they field their position, for how well they hold a runner on. Players are rated 3 different types of speed ratings: how good of a base runner they are, how well of a jump they get, how good they are at stealing. Because jump and stealing are intertwined but separate, because a guy can get a good jump also as far as, going, getting off the base and going from first to third, and
right.
Outfielders are rated.
But he may not be able to read the pitcher's moves.
Right, exactly. Well, that's where the stealing rating comes in.
Right,
Guys,
exactly.
So
it's not just speed.
Yes, and so in this league, we have 8 teams. So it's a bit of a superstar league, but we have a 25-man roster, but we keep our full rosters to 33. So this way we want the draft to be richer every year so teams can turn themselves around. And you're actually playing the game head to head. So you are managing the team. You are, making the moves. Most of the time, you're doing the basic move where the pitcher is throwing and the batter is swinging. But you can also bunt, and players are rated for how good they are at sacrifice bunting as well as bunting for a base hit. When you're pitching, you can pitch. You can pitch around. You can intentionally walk. You can try a pickoff. Also, when you're batting, you can try to steal. You can hit and run. And for defense, you can also play corners infield in. You can play the guys down the lines. And basically, you're managing a game of full 9 innings. Pitching matchups, we play with no DH pitching. And you know what? The games are pretty freaking intense. Am I right, Leuck?
Oh, yes.
The computer plays the game, but you're playing the stats of the current major league players. You're playing the ability of the current and major league players.
In other words, yes, you're playing off of the ability of what their stats were the previous year. So we're using 2015 stats. And I like that a lot better because you're using what their real stats were. You're also you're using game strategy. As opposed to fantasy baseball, it's like you're using categories that, may actually be the byproduct of, like, who batted in front of them, who's protecting them behind them. I mean,
exactly.
And guys, and we also have limitations. Like if a guy played 20 games at third and 60 games at second, he doesn't get a full-time second base and full-time third base rating. You have to have played 40 games minimum to have a rating full-time. If you only played 20 games at third, that's how many games you can play the guy at third before the rating is removed. You can play him unrated. There will be some negative consequences. He may be still usable, but there's negative consequences. Things that we feel a little more realistic where, like, a guy plays one game at a position, oh, great, in fantasy ball, he can play there all year. So, things like that. I myself, I enjoy it a lot. And the preparation for the draft, we have to put more into it than fantasy players do because you don't have a gazillion books and magazines coming out and articles online about who to pick, where to different draft strategies. You're on your own,
right? Because you're drafting much earlier.
You don't have that type of coverage. So
okay. I'm going to ask you guys a question based on a question that Wayne asked me in an off air conversation we were having about my fantasy ball experiences as a manager, what frustrated me and what I wasn't good at. I really wasn't good enough at it that I couldn't even come up with how I wasn't good. I'd panic, you'd go a week or so with that player would be in a horrible slump. I'd say, this guy's never going to get another hit for me. And, bench him at the wrong time, this, that, and the other thing. I'm going to ask you guys, I'll turn it around. I don't play fantasy anymore. It was too frustrating, too difficult for me to do what I'm doing following the, with the podcast, following the Mets and, and living life. So, but my point is, I want to ask you guys the same question Wayne asked me. What are your strengths and weaknesses as a fantasy manager / general manager? I'll start with you because you're the guest, Lucky, and you're lucky enough to start first.
Okay.
I feel like Groucho Marx.
Yeah, I think if you talk,
it's the most ridiculous thing. Lucky is his name, and he roots for Cleveland. So what's wrong with this picture?
And I consistently finish below 500 in this league, so I'm not that lucky. I think my strength is strategy. I know baseball strategy very well. That's the number one strength. After that,
okay,
the weakness had to do with basically guessing which players to draft because they look good on paper, but like Wayne says, it's sort of a superstar league, and so I'm constantly frustrated with hitters that hit well in real life and then strike out a ton in our league because the pitching's so strong. And Wayne has to constantly
looking for sleepers. Am I right? Guys that you could pick up inexpensively or on.
Well, you can get you better if you have a strong enough team to do that. And I would have to say that Wayne will do that. He'll take a look, take a chance on a guy like he's got Seager from the Dodgers in there now, hoping he has a good year. But Wayne's got a strong team. The rest of us are building that team, and we can't necessarily afford to pick up somebody we can sit around for a year or two. So we have to go for players that performed. The hard part, I guess, is just like in real life, is determining what their future will be. Is it worth a pick? And then when you think you have somebody, they get hurt. I had a streak last year. 3 or 4 of my guys had Tommy John surgery, and they're done for 2 years. And I'm going, then you got to start all over. And then this year, Carlos Graff goes down for 2 months, and so I don't know what he'll come up with next year. But that's the hard part. I guess that's the way it is in real life. And it's hard to say that makes it a weakness, but in fact it is because it affects the outcome of the game.
Well, here's the big question mark is always pitching, always with the injuries, coming back from injuries. That's a big one. And with batters, too, is that inner core injury that you're getting an awful lot out of that never happened before, that
right.
or wasn't defined before. And, how about you, Wayne?
Well, I'll tell you. I think my game strategy is okay, but I really love the draft, and I love picking, and Corey Seager was a no-brainer. But I'll tell you a pick that I was proud of the year before, and that was taking Chris Archer late in the draft. And he was someone that I had watched and for years before, always killing the Yankees. But the reason I never picked him up is because in our leagues, lefty-righty splits are very important for both batters and pitchers. More important for pitchers. Batters, you can start a batter, a righty, against a lefty pitcher, a righty who doesn't hit righties good. You can start him against a lefty pitcher, and then when the righty comes in, you can substitute him because he's obviously a platoon player. But a pitcher there's just no way you can avoid one side or the other. So you need a guy with decent splits. You can have a guy with stronger splits on one side than the other, but he can't have bad splits on either side. And Chris Archer was a guy who got rocked by lefties. He had huge disparity in splits. And then, not this past year when he had his unbelievable all-star breakout season, but the year before, he had a good season, and his numbers against lefties were better than his numbers against righties. And I picked him up, and I had him, because I had a guy get hurt, I actually had him in the rotation for a while. He did well. And then, of course, he had that great year. But, but I've made blunders in the draft. As a matter of fact, I screwed up this year in the draft. David Peralta, who we thought would go in the first, maybe late in the first round, early second round, fell to me with the last pick of the second round, and I picked him up, and I shouldn't have. I should have stayed with going for pitching, which, load up on pitching early in the draft, which worked for me the year before. And my team was not doing well, and Peralta was really doing poorly for me. And I made a trade, and Peralta was part of that trade. And I brought in, I traded Peralta and a lefty bullpen arm for a righty bullpen arm, and Kevin Kiermaier, who's an unbelievable defensive player. And it seemed my team is right now is going in the right direction. When I made that trade, I was in 7th place. I'm now in 3rd place. So, of course, a lot of my other guys weren't translating and hitting either, but that lengthened my bullpen, and that was huge. And just like in Major League Baseball, you lengthen your bullpen, you improve your defense. It's huge. I sacrificed a little offense, but you know what? It paid off for me.
Okay.
Wayne, one of Wayne's other great moves was Salvador Perez. He snagged Salvador when he was pretty much just beginning to be known, and now he's a top-notch catcher.
Yeah, Perez. Actually, that year, I went big that year, and I think. But again, I'll tell you who I drafted that year. I drafted Machado, Matt Moore, Salvador Perez, and Matt Harvey, all before the 10th round. And granted, it helped me going forward. But for that year, I was probably a little short, and I didn't win that year. But Manny Machado was the main cog of a trade that got me Mike Trout. And,
right, exactly.
And then, you want to hear something funny? The guy, I won't mention any names, the guy who I traded Manny Machado to also had drafted Nolan Arenado, which was a great pick for him. So last year he had Machado and Arenado, and I needed a third baseman. And I said, so I went after I reacquired Machado, and I paid a pretty hefty price to get Manny Machado in a 6th-round pick. I gave up Carlos Carrasco, who was a number 1 starter in our league. I gave up Kyle Seager, and I gave up Craig Kimbrell. So I filled 3 spots for this guy to get Manny Machado. So, but again, like having, drafting, guys that blossom also is huge for you, when you want to trade. It gives you trade assets.
Yeah. Let me give you 3 tips that the only 3 things I've ever done consistently that I did well. I'd always look for a hitter, a catcher who can hit, and a shortstop who can hit, get those guys early on. And to make the year go easier, find a closer from your own team. Like if I were playing, I'd want to have Familia as my closer. Just makes it easier.
Well, I happen to have Andrew Miller and Dylan Betances on my team. I don't have them. I didn't get them because they were Yankees. It was just opportunity, a need, and and it's just the way it fell that way. But
right. Well, I wouldn't say that about any other. I wouldn't say take a right because he was a Met, for instance, or a Granderson just because he was a Met. But I would with a closer just because of the psychological thing when you're going through your day. You don't want to be rooting against your own closer. You don't want to be rooting against your own team as much as you possibly can. And now I'll tell you too, my only 4th tip that I have is if you're going to make a trade a pitcher and acquire a position player. Just down the road, I mean, hitters are who they are. Pitchers, you don't know what the hell they are.
It's true, but you know what? But nonetheless,
generalizing, of course.
You still need a quality pitcher. And the other thing in our league is, it's nice. You always want to draft a good. You always want to have a good offensive player at a supposedly defensive-minded position. But in our league, defense counts. In fantasy ball, it doesn't. So, that's why things just. You know, like when people ask me about fantasy baseball, I tell them I say I can tell you about a player themselves, but I says I can't tell you like where they are is where it's going to be as fantasy because everything depends on leagues and categories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Hey, we all learned something tonight. We learned that there are many, many reasons to hate the frickin' Yankees. And again, to worship them, my God, what a history! I mean, if the Mets win every day, the rest of my life, they'll never make up for what all those losses in the early years. They'll never even get to 500 for crying out, let alone 25, 26 world champions. Just over 100 years.
I think it's up to 27. I could be wrong though.
Okay, well, that...
I think 2009 became 27.
Well...
yeah, I think so because Joe Girardi changed his number to that.
So if his number is 28, then they're at 27.
I think it's 27.
It's 27.
Yeah. But
it's 27, then there probably is still a 26, but still 26, Jesus Christ. I mean, and again, we talk about what if you're the Cubs, as badly as you feel. And
I know.
Just to stress that Joey Bell team that they had with Sandy Alomar, Roberto Alomar at second base, and Tomei coming up. What do you think of that team? Was that all steroids, or was it?
No. I think Jim Tomei has been totally clean his whole career. No, and so is Sandy Alomar. Robbie Alomar, I don't know enough about. No, that was not storage. Albert Bell, he got caught with the corked bat one time, but he was just an animal. And the other big boy was Manny Ramirez, and he was young.
And later on, he did have some steroidal instances. So, you never know, but we've come to the conclusion that if 80% of the players were doing it, what the hell? Just put an asterisk in your mind. This is the era it was. It's impossible to compare eras anyway. Another thing that Peter Golenbach pointed out to me, because the Ty Cobb era didn't include black players.
Right.
And there was the dead ball era and this, that, and the other thing. So all we can do if we want to find out in our own minds who are the greatest of the greats is simply compare them to the people they played against. And if you're worried about guys doing steroids, better start worried about pitchers doing steroids too, because they were making up for it on that side. And that's the way it was. You can't fight it. It was an era, and I'll tell you something, it's still going on. It's like about 7 or 8 minor league players have been suspended, and their testing procedures are much more stringent than the major league testing procedures because of the unions, who really do think they're doing a good job by the players by protecting them from drug tests and this, that, and the other thing. And what people don't even talk about anymore is the ill effects of steroidal medicine on one's body. And,
exactly.
You could talk about Lyle Alzado and Caminiti and all of these players. Hasn't even come to fruition. We don't know. In other words, not enough medical evidence in, but it's going to be like with the helmets, with the football helmets someday. People are going to go, whoa. You got a lot of guys dying at 55 from things that broke down their circulatory system, their kidneys, their liver, this, that, and the other thing. And the unions think, well, we're protecting these players because now they can go on making money. And the whole idea of the priority of money and the fact that what we follow is no more than a business where the playing field isn't level because of the money, and people will do things to their bodies because of money that they they wouldn't do. You know, you're going to make your kids rich, your grandkids rich, but you'll be dead at 55. I don't understand that. I really don't.
Ralph, I got to tell you, I disagree with a lot of what you said. Major League Baseball did a really good job of placing the blame of delaying drug testing on the union. You know what? They turned their backs because the home run binge was making them money. It was bringing back fans. It was helping them to recover from the strike of 1994. Okay?
Right.
So you really can't put it on the players' union. And the drug testing is no different at the minor leagues than it is in the major leagues. The difference is, what I feel, is the major league players, the ones that are still using some type of performance-enhancing drugs, they can afford the whole regimen, which includes all the masking agents. The minor leaguers, the guys that have the talent, the guys that were drafted high in the rounds, that got the $1 million bonuses and multi-million-dollar bonuses, they can hide it, but they don't need them. They've got the talent. It's the ones that don't that are doing it. But at the major league level, these are the guys that are going to guys like Tony Bosch. These are the guys that did not get caught in drug testing and had nothing to do with the drug testing regimen of Major League Baseball. It had to do with the regimen that's been developed by the cheaters, by the chemists that are working on the other side, and the masking agents, and everything else involved. These guys, they only got caught because the FBI raided Tony Bosch and said, "Oh, hey, listen, hey, Major League Baseball, hey, we found this piece of paper here. You may want to take a look at it." That's how they got caught up. None of them failed the drug test. So, Major League Baseball is they're not an oh poor me in this. They're a guilty party just like anybody else. Chasing
Absolutely.
money. Remember,
but
Ralph,
the unions,
follow the money.
My point is the unions played a complicit part in all of it.
Of course. But you made it sound as though they stonewalled Major League Baseball in drug testing. No, it wasn't. It wasn't until the public and Congress stood on both of their heads and said, "Oh no, you're going to do something, or we are." But Major League Baseball, they, like I say, they put up a nice victim front on this, but they were no victim.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the public was too much against it. I think the public still would love. I don't care what they do to their bodies. I'd love to see the home run type of thing. I think what it was Congress, and if you stop to think about the hypocrisy of Congress judging anybody for anything in this here world, it's almost comical.
When you think about it, it was a whole cycle of hypocrisy, but nonetheless, there was, but what I'm saying is Major League Baseball is no innocent babe in this at all.
No. The ones I feel bad for are Hank and Willie, because they fought through from the early 50s through all the incredible racism and still performed and played well, and were sold out by MLB by allowing this to continue so Sammy Sosa and Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire could hit home runs.
Well, I will always remember the high road that Hank Aaron took when Bonds broke the record and they put it up on the scoreboard.
Yeah.
That was absolute class. I'll also always remember that KNBR, who covered the Giants, the flagship station for their broadcast, his name was Lee Hammer, if I'm not mistaken, and he was the engineer. And when the call came, the line went dead. That call was never made on radio. It never went out there when Bonds broke the record. Said it was an accident, things happened. Never happened. Ever. When the transmission was cut off, and it happened at that moment. So there were people that are purists in this world who just didn't think, it just wasn't kosher. I feel ripped off. I remember going to a game when he was in the middle of a streak that was, this guy would not strike out. He was just, he had this big armband on, this big elbow thing.
The elbow pad, yep.
The elbow pad, which made people feel even, he had to know something was up. His head was about, he went from a size 7 3/8 to an 8.5 cap. Your head doesn't grow when you work out. We know it, but now we know everybody did it. And yes, the stars have the masking agents, but when it comes down to it, again, you can take a deep breath and say, so you hit 320. And when you're 55 years old and you have something that's debilitating and affects either your lifestyle or literally the number of years you have left on Earth, and nobody gets out alive, but it's a trait. It's just not worth it. It's like the football players are finding out with the helmets. They walk around, they don't know what zip code they're in. And
exactly.
And you still have guys like Jerry Jones who come out and say, well, all the tests aren't in and we're not going to really admit. They already copped to it. They already settled. And a backward guy like Jerry Jones, there'll be backward guys in baseball because baseball is going to take a part of the hit when lawsuits come from all this later on down the road. Because, yes, they were complicit. Every minor league trainer knew. Every minor league player knew. All of it. And the guys I feel sorry for are the guys that played in AAA never got to make the majors because they played it. Guys beat them out that didn't have as much talent. Even if it were for one week, one game, you make the major leagues. There was an article in Sports Illustrated about 2 or 3 guys that played together, and the bitterness of these guys who just went back to their lives never having played in the majors, career minor leaguers who knew they were better than this other guy who came up and he was dirty. So it's not just the stars you're talking about, it's the hanger-oners, and you have to compromise your body to be a utility infielder in the same way. You may be able to see it, a Barry Bonds or a McGuire. You compromise your body. Well, you made $1 zillion. You're a star, this, that, and the other thing. But if you're Phil Gagliano, with this apologies to the memory of Phil Gagliano, if you're still around, utility infielder with the Cardinals when I was a kid, or Julio Gotay, who's just, why would you put your body through that? That's my rant. Prove me wrong again one more time, Wayne. We'll go.
Listen, we can go back and forth with this all night, I say it was mostly a level playing field. It really was.
Well, from that standpoint, yes, because the pitchers had to be in on it as well, the superstar pitchers, the Clemens and the Pettits and what have you. We're a forgiving nation, and brings me back to Pete Rose, who and another Cleveland guy, Ray Fosse, who he barreled into him in an All-Star game unnecessarily, ruined his career in essence. Ray Fosse was going to be like a Johnny Bench, and he had a good career, but he wasn't the same. But we're a forgiving nation when it comes to stuff like that. The people that copped to doing the steroids, that say, hey, I made a mistake, they were forgiven. A lot of them have jobs in baseball, not just McGuire and stuff, but there are guys in broadcasting that had appeared on the Mitchell Report. Baseball's forgiving. The world is forgiving. I wish Pete Rose would have copped to stuff. It's off the subject a little bit, but he should be in the Hall of Fame, and he would have been if he copped to the gambling thing. Shouldn't be in it because he covered it up, he lied and all, but that's a tragedy.
Well, one thing, though, the Hall of Fame is a separate entity of Major League Baseball. So him being banned from Major League Baseball is a separate decision than the decision that the Hall of Fame has made. So
yeah, true. But the writers are make that decision. He's not banned from getting votes. The writers make the decision.
No, he is banned from getting votes. He's not. The Hall of Fame, the board of directors, they have deemed him ineligible.
No, he got 25% of the votes last year.
Pete Rose? No.
Yeah. Pete Rose. I'm sorry.
Pete Rose has never been on the ballot.
No, you're absolutely correct. I'm sorry.
You're thinking of Bonds.
Yes,
Right.
I was.
So, anyway, I think
I didn't realize that. Yes, they've held, but it is two separate entities from that standpoint. Okay.
So, okay, Ralph, we've reached that time of the show where you close it out.
I will. I want you to get some practice in closing it out.
Okay. Well, we've reached...
First of all, I'd like to thank you very much, Lucky, for coming on. You're articulate, and it was a trip to go back memory lane with you.
I really appreciate even having the opportunity. Baseball is a passion of mine, and being able to talk about it with you guys makes it all that much better. So thank you for having me.
Well, not just please, if you had fun, come back because.
I'll come back definitely.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wingo, close them out.
Okay. Well, Lucky, thank you for coming on. A pleasure as always, Ralph. It's been a pleasure. Great show. We covered a lot of different stuff, and hey, it's baseball time. And I don't know about you guys, but as soon as we sign off, I'm going to check some box scores. Have a good night.
Let me tell you something before you go, just for Yankee haters. The Texas Rangers 3, the New York Yankees 2. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right. Well, how about for Met lovers?
The Met lovers. Let me check that score for you right now. Who'd they play? The Mets 5-2 over Cincinnati. 5-2 Mets over Cincinnati.
Ah, nice. They held off. The bullpen's steady. I like that. It's not quite orgasmatic, but it's a good feeling. A little twinge went down there. Can't deny that.
And
life is life.
And the Cleveland Indians are setting themselves up for another walk-off by the Twins because they're winning 6-5 at the top of the 8th. Bottom of the 7th.
And that's how they roll. Is that what you're telling me?
Yep. Last night they lost on a walk-off in the 9th, and the previous evening they lost on a home run in the 9th. So, yep, that's what it's setting up for.
All right. Thank you very much.
Good night,
Great
everybody.
show.
All right, good night.
Good night, everybody. Take care.